Welcome to the Spiritualpreneur Podcast. I'm your host, Christian, aka Love Pixel. And in each episode, we sit down with spiritual entrepreneurs sharing their knowledge, wisdom, and tools on their path to authentic success. Let's dive in. What's up, beautiful people? This is Christian from the Successful Spiritualpreneur Podcast. And today I'm super honored and excited to have Ora Nadrich on the show. She's a pioneering mindfulness expert, international speaker, and founder of the Institute for Transformational Thinking. She's the creator of Says Who Method, a powerful questioning technique that helps people break through limiting beliefs and transform their lives. Ora is the author of multiple acclaimed books, including Says Who and Mindful and Mysticism, as well as Live True, which was named one of the 100 best mindfulness books of all times. And another person, Marianne Williamson, which many of you know, says to Ora that when she speaks, I listen. When she writes, I read it. And when she gives advice, I heed it. So welcome to the show, Ora.
Hi, Christian. So happy to be here with you.
Lovely. So before we hop into your, methods and beautiful frameworks you've discovered and share with the world, we'd love to get to know you on a more personal level. So what was your story and path to mindfulness like? What was your life before you found mindfulness, so to say?
Well, I was a meditator. I was an actress, and I learned meditation while I was acting. I didn't know anybody that was meditating at the time, but I was so blessed to be introduced to TM, Transcendental Meditation. And that really taught me how to be a disciplined meditator. And I meditated with the Transcendental Meditation method for many, many years. And then I read about mindfulness. And when I read about mindfulness, it really resonated for me because mindfulness is really the practice of taking the meditation philosophy, if you will, and taking it off the yoga mat or the meditation pillow. So I became certified in mindfulness and mindfulness meditation, and I started to teach mindfulness meditation, and I started to write extensive articles in some of the top magazines and for Huffington Post on the mindfulness practice. And then I authored 4 books that are really mindfulness based. So once I got introduced to the practice, to the discipline of mindfulness, that was it. I just fell really in love with the modality, the philosophy, the practice of mindfulness.
Beautiful. And what was it that drew you into mindfulness? Because, I think, especially back in the day, mindfulness really wasn't that popular. To make that your thing, so to say, what was the prompt for that?
Yeah, most people, if you ask them, well, what is mindfulness? I mean, if you just ask that question about the word mindfulness, connotes being mindful, being thoughtful. Do you know? And a lot of people don't know perhaps that that is about being mindful and thoughtful in present moment awareness, being in the present moment. And once I understood the whole idea of what it means to really be present in our lives and try to aspire to mindful awareness moment by moment, I thought this is one of the most powerful and the most beneficial ways to go through life, do you know? So it really got me pulled in such a positive way that I pursued it and I wanted to teach it to others, do you know? And you're right, so many people don't know, even till today. They don't really know, well, what is mindfulness? What does it look like as a contemplative practice, if you will? So, now more people are getting more versed and familiar with the mindfulness practice. And I do like to explain it that when we go into a meditation practice, we really put aside a certain amount of time to meditate. Do you know, you'll give yourself 20 minutes, 45 minutes, whatever your meditation practice is. And then once that meditation is over, you get up and you go out into life. But where the real work happens is when we are off, again, the yoga mat or the meditation pillow, to really be mindful of who we are in all the moments of our life, not just for 20 minutes or for 45 minutes.
Yeah. And before we dive into your methods and your books, like, what is something that everyone can do to in their daily lives to, I guess, like, what's a simple tool without reading books or frameworks or this or that? Just like, what's one thing that brings people back that you're just like, yeah, this everybody should do this.
Good question. I really encourage people to start the mindfulness practice from the minute they wake up in the morning. And so, you could ask, well, how does one do that? For me, I will share my own personal mindfulness practice that begins first thing in the morning. And that is from the minute you wake up in the morning, be present and aware of the moment that you're in right now, which means oftentimes people will jump out of bed very quickly. They're eager and they're hurried to get to the next moment rather than really being grateful for the present moment that they're in right now. We're very hurried for the most part, and a study out of Harvard shows that we are in the present moment not very much. We usually are not in the present. We're either in the future of a time frame which hasn't come yet, or we're in the past of a time which has already come and gone. So to put it into practical usage, I say, in the moment, in the morning, really be present. You're lying in bed perhaps. For me, I like to open my curtains first thing in the morning so I can really take in what I'm looking at. And I can really be present with right now. I'm looking out my window. I see the beautiful clouds. It's been raining. I'm not rushing through the moment. I'm really appreciating the moment that I'm in right now. When you have to get out of bed, try and implement that with the next thing that you do, which might mean going to take a shower. We go in and we take a shower, we're really hurried. We're quick to take our shower. Smell the shampoo that you're using, smell the soap that you're using, really feel the sensation of washing your body. Do you know? Take that into the next installment of your day. You're going to have breakfast. One of the things that we hurry through so much is the meals that we eat, that we don't really experience the full benefits of the food that we're tasting. Take the time to really smell the food that you're eating, to experience the texture, the taste, the feeling of it on your lips, in your mouth, swallowing it. So those are just a couple of examples of how if you start early in the morning and you don't just rush out of bed and then you let that jumpstart your day, what you're doing really is you're having a mindful awareness from the minute you wake up, and that becomes sort of the precedent of how you set your day. That's the benchmark of how you, from that mindful awareness, you begin your day.
Hmm. Wonderful, beautiful. Thanks for sharing that. And with that, inviting people to that openness to mindfulness, how did you discover? Because it seems like questions rather than answers have more of this open energy, right? So, how did you first discover that asking questions is more powerful than giving answers?
Really good question. I do believe in the philosophy, the very Socratic, if you will, philosophy of questioning everything. If we don't question, we don't get the answers. And a lot of people just accept whatever is presented to them, and they accept it as true, and they readily accept whatever is told to them, whatever they see, and they don't make it their own personal experience. So questioning to me really allows us to go further into an experience and to decide how we feel about that experience, to decide if we even want to participate in that experience, to decide if we even want to accept that experience, whatever that experience is. And you can apply that to anything and everything in your life. So for me, questioning, which is really the basis of my first book, Says Who, which is a questioning method that I created for questioning our thoughts. A lot of people will say to me, wow, or I never even thought to question my thoughts. And a lot of the times people think that the thoughts that they have, especially the negative and the fear-based thoughts that dominate their mind, they can't question it to find out if they even want to continue thinking those thoughts. And I say, we are the creator and the manifester of our inner dialogue, which creates our reality. And by that, I mean, question your thoughts so that you can curate and you can pick and choose the type of thoughts that really support your well-being and help you along the life journey to manifest the very things that you want to create for yourself.
Hmm. So, can you give us a real example of someone using the says who method and having some sort of breakthrough moment through this? Can you walk us through a dialogue?
Sure. Well, first of all, I want to share that I think we all know that our thinking mind is incredibly active. And a lot of the times, the inner dialogue or the inner chatter seems to feel like it's taking us over. We think between 40 and 70,000 thoughts a day. Well, that's a staggering amount of thinking, but most often we're not cognizant of all the thoughts that are going in and out of our mind. The thoughts that get our attention primarily are the negative and fear-based thoughts. Those are the ones that stop us in our tracks and start to dominate the thinking process and start to really loop in our mind. So from an observer point of view, and mindfulness is really being in the present moment with total awareness, with non reactivity and self love. And what that means essentially is, not to go into reactive mode, but to be in observation mode. So, for example, if a negative thought pops up in your mind, and it invariably will, because we have negative thoughts, we have the inner critic. What I suggest to people is the minute a negative thought comes up into your mind, observe it and start to have a dialogue with yourself. And if it's a negative thought that repeats itself, or you've had this negative critical thought, maybe for years in your life, you've carried that thought forward, it's become a dominant part of your thinking process. What I suggest for people to do is to first and foremost, go into observation mode, which is like, oh, there's that thought again. Okay, I'm having that thought again that's telling me it could be anything from I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, I'm not going to get that job, I'm not going to meet my soulmate, whatever your inner negative dialogue is, to be with it, to allow for it. Don't deny it, don't push it away. And the first says who question of the says who method is says who? Who is saying this negative or fear based thought in my mind? And to take responsibility that I am. I am telling myself I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy. I'm not going to get that dream job. I'm never going to meet my soulmate. And when you start to deconstruct that thought, first with the observing of it, you can start to do what I say, one of my favorite techniques that's in my book called the release and replace technique. The release and replace technique, which is so user friendly, and I've taught to thousands of people that use it till today, is the minute that negative thought pops up into your head, replace it with a positive counterpart, even if you don't believe it. So, in other words, if you could say, I'm never going to get that job. If you can tell yourself, I am going to get the job that I really desire. When you start to feed yourself positive reinforcing thoughts, it starts to go into the subconscious, and the subconscious is a storage room for all the thoughts that we tell ourselves. And when you start to develop a healthier thinking habit of mind, your mind will start to default more to positive support thinking versus negative thinking. So this is a practice, it's a mental discipline, and I say do it, start it one step at a time. And when you start to do that, you really are developing neuroplasticity in the brain, that you're developing more positive neurons that are, in your head, and that you don't default to a negative mindset and you start to learn how to develop positive thinking.
Hmm. Yeah, I love that. I think it's just the hardest part to somehow make this a habit, or somehow make this like, have this positive mindset become the default that we go through. Um,
Christian, we're not going to be positive all the time. That's part of the thinking process. But what I really invite people to do is to try and commit to a type of discipline. People are more inclined to commit to working out than they are to working with their thoughts. and becoming more disciplined with mind strength. They might be really good at, working out so they can look good and stay in shape, but their mental shape is not really optimum, So if you can apply the same discipline to one thought at a time, one step at a time, and really start to address your negative and fear-based thoughts and work with them. Don't deny them, don't push them away, and don't fuel them. Don't give them more space in your mind. I say this is the most valuable real estate there is the thinking mind.
Yeah. Yeah, so true. And what what would you say is the biggest misconception that people have about your method before they try it?
I think people, yes, before they try it, might think, well, I can't control my thoughts. My thoughts control me, which is another says who thought. Well, who said that your thoughts control you? You are telling yourself that. That's already like, think of all the things we tell ourselves and how quickly we dismiss positive things that can come into our life because we already have a preconceived idea of what that looks like. Okay. And what is that? That's all the negative thoughts that we tell ourselves. So, one of those things I think that people feel is they have suffered so much feeling dominated by their negative and fear based thoughts that they don't believe that something like this could help them. Well, I say, first of all, try it. And the more you do it, the more you see the results. I've had so many people come back to me and say, wow, this really works, or I don't really think as negatively as I used to. I used to be such a negative person, and now I'm really not. Or when a negative thought comes up, I catch it faster. I don't just give into it. I don't just surrender to it. I don't just accept it. They believe through the practice of this that they can actually work with their mind and be able to change their negative thoughts to positive ones. And again, this isn't an expectation that happens all the time. This is a skill set. This teaches you how to work with negative thoughts. Negative thoughts are never going to go away entirely, but you're going to get really good at catching them faster and working with them and dissolving them.
And that skill you also teach in your Institute for Transformational Thinking, correct?
Yes.
And in growing and building that, like, what were the biggest challenges in growing your own institute?
Well, I can't say that there weren't really a lot of obstacles or challenges with it because I knew that I wanted to have all my work, all my workshops, all my books, all the skill sets and the methods and the modalities that I was teaching others to be under the umbrella of the IFTT, the Institute for Transformational Thinking. And I think once people entered into that milieu, once they understood that there's an actual environment, if you will, where we can really work with our thoughts productively day in and day out, I started to see such an immediate receptivity to it that people really want to change. They don't want to, for those that do, they don't want to stay stuck. They don't want to stay stuck in limited thinking. So the Institute really offered so much to people, and I saw a lot of people really come forward that were really interested in it and really wanted to participate.
Very cool. And within your with your institute, you also certify others in your method, correct?
Yes, I do. I created a niche of coaching. I was a life coach for 10 years, and for some reason I never really loved the term life coach because it seemed so broad to me. It seemed non-specific, if you will. Like, well, what about life? What parts of life are you coaching?
Hmm.
Are you coaching people? Yes, you could say about everything in life. But what I realized is that I was really coaching people to understand their thinking better. So I created a whole kind of revolutionary area of coaching called the thought coach. And I started to certify people as thought coaches through the says who method so that they could learn how to coach. Having gone through the certification themselves, they could then create a practice, a thriving practice for themselves to become a thought coach and help others become, first and foremost, to learn how to master their own thinking mind. And if someone wants to become a thought coach, great, or they want to just go through the process of the thought coach method, the says who method, that's great too. So it really turned into this incredibly successful coaching opportunity. And I had so many people, some who were already life coaches and some who were therapists and had been involved in other areas of some type of therapy modality that love the whole idea of becoming a certified thought coach.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's beautiful that, you created something that allows others to take that with them and do something with that, right?
Exactly. That felt empowering to me that people could not only fully understand their own thinking mind better, but to give them an opportunity to take this coaching method and, flourish with it themselves. That was exciting for me.
Yeah. Let's talk about your books. Your first book, Says Who. Like, how did you get into writing a book, I guess, is the question. And then how did you get it published?
Well, the Says Who method really came to me when I was coaching a client of mine. And I hadn't written the book at the time, but was working with a client, and she came to me with a thought that was really troubling her. I thought she was coming to me to discuss something else, but she really revealed to me that there was a thought that she had that was really troubling her. And when she shared it with me, I had such a huge aha moment. I was like, I have a really strong feeling that this fear-based thought, she had a very deep, fearful thought about herself that was really paralyzing her to do something that she wanted to do creatively in her life. When she shared it with me, with this aha moment, I was like, I don't believe that thought originated with her. I feel she learned that thought or she heard that thought from someone else and she took that negative, fearful thought on as her own. And something very magical happened when I was in session with her. I started to question her. And going back to what one of your first questions to me is, why is questioning so important? I started to question her about, how long has she had this thought? Did she ever hear anybody say this to her because she took this on as real? And, how is this thought making her feel? Which is three of the Says Who questions are what became part of the Says Who method. And when I started to coach her in this questioning way, it was helping her tremendously because it was helping her connect the dots of why this thought has entered into her mind and why it dominates her mind so negatively. And I saw this incredible breakthrough with her when I was questioning her, which then became the Says Who method. I didn't know it at the time. So that really inspired me to write Says Who. I thought, wow, I just worked with this client. I'm asking her these questions. I think these questions are really valuable in helping someone understand their negative and fear-based thoughts and to learn how to work with them and to challenge them. So I was super inspired and I wrote Says Who, and I knew I had something very special on my hands because I saw it firsthand help somebody. And I created the Says Who method, the 7 questions, and there's so many other skill sets and techniques that are in the book. And then I, looked for a publisher and I found a publisher at the time that loved it and took it on, and that was it.
Beautiful. I love that. So, Says Who is all about, breaking your limiting beliefs, changing your mindset. What about Live True? Because, that one was also named, one of the, 100 best mindfulness books of all time. How is that book different in its own regard?
Well, that book really was the first book that I put the mindfulness practice into. I combined mindfulness with the authentic self. And Says Who is a cognitive book. It's a method, again, on transformational thinking. Live True was an opportunity for me to write a book where I can really bring in the mindfulness practice, the practice of awareness of when we're being inauthentic to ourselves. And so I really love the whole idea of being able to merge, to couple mindfulness with the authentic self. That just seemed like a winning combination for me because, again, without a present moment awareness of who we are in the moment, it's very easy for us to not be true to ourselves and be someone that we're really not in situations that ultimately don't make us happy. Do you know? So I wrote Live True, and I really broke it down into so many ways so that people could understand how valuable it is to be present, and that when we're not present and when we're not really functioning in an authentic way, we suffer. Do you know, I say in Live True, it's a lot harder to be who you're not than to be who we are. Do
Yeah.
you know?
Hmm.
So that really was received so well, and it got acknowledged by Book Authority as and was voted as one of the top mindfulness books of all time. And it's also an extremely helpful book for people to really live the authentic life. And I also added a journal to it, which is the mindful Live True Mindfulness Journal, so that people can really every day enter in a, journaling, if you will, about how they're living their day. Were they inauthentic today? Were they able to be more authentic? And that's how you start to break the habits, by integrating and incorporating other ways of thinking. So that was super successful too, because it gave people an actual workbook to be able to write down how they are connecting more mindfully to the authentic self.
Hmm. And then your latest book, Mindfulness and Mysticism, how is that? How is that an evolution? And it also has, the foreword by His Holiness the Dalai Lama. How is that book? How does it compare to the other two?
Well, that's my third book. That's not my book after that was Time to Awaken, which was my fourth book. But mindfulness and mysticism really came to me. All the books that I write come to me in a way that it's exploring something that feels really important to me. Like I'm on that journey myself. Like I am going into a deep dive of a particular journey that I'm exploring, and then I write the book because I really want to bring others onto the journey with me, knowing that they too can be liberated in the ways that I became liberated on my own personal journey. So mindfulness and mysticism was really different in that, again, but using the thinking process, that our thoughts create states of consciousness. And I broke that down into different states of consciousness that we are in. We're in the sleep state, we're in the, awake state. And so many of our thoughts really create an energy that we are experiencing, be it positive or negative. And so the deep exploration that I took with that book was to um, help me understand that our thoughts can turn anything into a experience that could feel very spiritual for us. It can feel very magical for us, and it can help us not be led by fear in the experiences that we have. And the more we accept a more expansive view of thinking, the more we can have mystical experiences. Now, mystical experiences doesn't have to be something that just sounds so esoteric or something that only some people experience. A mystical experience can be a magical experience. A mystical experience can feel like you're experiencing a type of bliss, a type of joy that sometimes is even hard to put into words, do you know? And we've all had those experiences. We may have not called them a mystical experience, but we've allowed ourselves to transcend fearful thinking. And what that does is it helps us experience states of consciousness that feel so beautiful. And sometimes it's even hard to explain what it is, do you know? And I wanted people to know that everybody can experience that if they allow themselves to go into a more transformational thinking and to transcend those thoughts that pretty much weigh us down and keep us stuck in very limited thinking. And that limited thinking limits our experiences.
Hmm. Beautiful. And with all your work, especially maybe in regards to mindfulness means mysticism, like what mystical traditions or teaching like have most influenced you?
Well, a lot of books that I read, and I read a lot of books by Evelyn Underwood, who was a mystic. I mean, there have been a lot of mystics throughout time and who lived their lives being led, I felt, by something that transcended the limitations again of the of a world that is ruled by thoughts. That I love the quote by mystic, French philosopher, mystic Pierre Teilhard de Chardin: "We are spiritual beings having a human experience." And that really resonated for me when I discovered that, because I thought, wow, we're in the body, we're in the physical, we're having all these day in and day out physical experiences. And a lot of those physical experiences um, keep us very stuck in a limited belief about ourselves. And if we accept the fact that we're spiritual beings, as Pierre Teilhard de Chardin said, we know that there's something really beautiful that is part of who we are, that's part of our soul and our spirit. And so I started to read more about the mystical experience, and read about other people throughout history that had had mystical experiences. And it really resonated for me. And I thought, this isn't something that just can be limited to just a few people or just people historically. These are experiences that each and every one of us can have, that are personal to us.
Hmm. Yeah, and it seems like, throughout the years, you just have all these angelic vibes about you, you know?
Thank you.
Yeah.
I want people to know that the life experience can be something that's really beautiful, or more than what they think is possible. We all know that life can be very difficult. We know that there are a lot of challenges on the life journey path. We know that there are a lot of things that can make life very difficult. But what I also want people to understand, that when they are more expansive in their thinking, they really can experience life in ways that seem angelic, if you will, to use your expression, or etheric, or ethereal, or words that don't usually describe the human experience. We can use other words to describe the human experience. Like, yeah, it can be great, and it can be fun, and it can be all these great things, but we can bump it up a notch. We can turn the volume up even more, and we can expand our senses even more, and we can optimize. And that's again why I love the mindfulness practice so much, because the mindfulness practice to me is the entry point into a life that feels so much more beautiful and so much more expansive.
Hmm. What do you say in the current phase of events with, technology, AI coming around? Like, what's your what's your take on that, I guess? I'll say very broadly.
Yeah, no, I think again, I am really enjoying your question. So my last book, my most recent book, is called To Awaken. Um, you know, uh, it's basically living consciously in a time where transforming the world with conscious awareness is really what it is. And I wrote about AI in my book, and I wrote about the transhumanism movement. And, for those that perhaps don't know about that, I think it's a good idea to research AI more. And it's going to be such an integral part of our lives. And the advent of technology, as powerful as it is really taking hold and taking shape. And even Elon Musk talks about it, that, AI is going to have a tremendous effect on our lives. And I remember him saying that quote 3 years ago. He said over the next 5 years, which would mean over the next 2 years. Okay. So I know that it's part of the technology revolution that we're in, and we cannot deny it. It exists, and it's going to get more and more pronounced and more defined in our lives. And it's a powerful tool. It's the most powerful tool we've ever experienced. And I think people have to be really prepared for it with a mindful awareness. And I think that the more mindful we are, it will affect our use of AI. And what is our intentionality? How do we want to use it? And I think it's pretty fascinating, because I talk about us as spiritual beings, and then now we have this technology. And how do you merge the two? Do you know? I mean, it's a pretty loaded topic, and we could go really deeper into it. I don't think we would have time to go as deep as we could. But what I really suggest to people is to be as mindfully aware of this technology as you can, and what type of relationship do you want to have with it, and to remember our humanity is the most important thing for us to preserve. So we've got all of this very advanced technology that's here, and it's the antithesis of spiritual because it's a technology, it's a tool, and so how do we preserve our spiritual integrity and also know that we're going to be interacting and interfacing with such advanced technology, and to just remember who we are, to protect the humanity of our civilization.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a very fascinating topic, because at some point even AI will develop its spirituality and own way of consciousness,
Yeah, yeah, there's a lot of talk around that, which I mean, I mentioned Ray Kurzweil, the singularity is near, who I researched when I wrote Time to Awaken. And, there's a lot of questions about the consciousness of AI. It's the word around AI is interesting to me because it's artificial. When you hear the word artificial versus human, intelligence brings up a lot of excuse me, a lot of things, like can an artificial intelligence ever have the type of consciousness that humans can have? I don't know. We're in the future. We're very in the future already. I love that quote by Albert Einstein. I don't worry about the future because it's already here. It's here. We're in it. It's happening. And I think with the advent of AI, it lets us know pretty clearly that it's here. So a lot more will be revealed about it. And I think we're living in a very fascinating time in our historical timeline to have these new technologies that are so powerful that we're going to be, having to coexist with. So it'll be really, really interesting to see how this evolves.
Yeah. Beautiful. I would like to explore a little bit more your work side. So when people, come and, have a coaching session or a part of your, institute in a way, like what would you say, who do you seem to attract? Like who are your ideal clients? Is it individuals going through a crisis, entrepreneurs, seekers, all of the above? What do you say?
I've had all of the above as clients. My favorite type of people to work with are people that want to change. I don't really want to be the person that you come to, that you just want to unload your problems. Not that you have to deny your problems or your traumas, or you can't present those to me. But I can tell pretty quickly between a person who really wants to change and go to the next place in their evolution. I'm a good person to work with for that. I'm not the right person to work with just to hold your hand, to vent about your past and the problems that you have had. I'm very solution oriented, and I can really help you um, transform. As you know, this goes all into the transformational thinking modality. That's what I'm most useful for, to work with people that are really on board to change. They genuinely want to change.
Yeah, makes sense. You want to work with people who are, hot iron, so to say, who are ready.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. It doesn't, for me to just, for you to pay me so that you can stay stuck, it doesn't interest me at all. And it just is something I have no interest in doing. And I made that very clear that, and so what that does, Christian, is it invariably will attract more and more. When I first became a life coach, I got so many different kinds of people that were coming to me. And with time, it started to get more refined. And so I think the people that really are attracted to it today, it's probably an energetic manifestation of my belief in that I want to only help people that really want to change, attracts those kinds of people to me.
Yeah. Yeah, makes sense. So let's talk about your legacy. Like, where do you see the mindfulness movement, your work going in the next 5 to 10 years? And yeah, where do you see your impact, or where yeah, what do you see yourself?
Yeah, I really feel, especially with the question that you just asked me about, AI, I really feel that on the life journey, self-realization is the most important thing to experience. Who am I? Why am I here? What am I doing here? What contribution can I make to my fellow humanity? What is it that I'm meant to be doing in this lifetime? Again, this goes back to questions, which are so key, fundamentally important in, helping support the self-realized self and to promote a journey of inner awareness, So I think the mindfulness work is more important now than ever because of the very things like AI that might take us further away from self-discovery of the, fully realized self. So I hope that the legacy that I'm putting into motion right now is that people really, embark on the journey of self-awareness. They are really unafraid to know themselves fully because when you're awake, and my book Time to Awaken really addresses all that, to be a really fully awake human being means that you really have a sharp awareness of not only the self, but others, your environment, and the world, and even the cosmos. It's how far you want to zoom out, that's part of your personal journey. And I think it's really necessary today because of the challenges that we will be facing with such powerful technology, as I just said. So I hope that the mindfulness practice is taught and learned to more people so that they can really value the discovery of the awake self. We really need to wake up more to address the problems of the universe, to really make things work, and to turn this planet of ours into the best that it can be. Not just to take from it and to destroy and to, just selfishly get from it what we want, but don't replenish it back. We need to wake up more. We need to know how to really, make this world not a dystopian reality, but try and aspire for it to be more of a utopian reality. I think it's possible.
Yeah, beautiful. I love that. So we're coming towards the end of the episode, and I always, love for you to just like, give it over to the guest and leave the listener with something that, what are the last words you want to leave them with?
I think the last words that I want to leave with is that, you know, go towards your truth. Live your truth. Live your individual truth. Be led by what really pulsates in your own heart and your own soul. That is within you. That comes from you. Lean into life with you as the creator, with you as the manifester. We're powerful. We are incredibly powerful. We could talk about how powerful something like AI is, okay? But as humans, we are unbelievably powerful, and we haven't even tapped into all the power that we're capable of. And I say this, in a benevolent way, that we are extraordinary, miraculous beings. So individually, I would say live your life guided by your own inner truth, your own inner compass of light that really is the guidance, is the beacon that leads you every step of the way on the life journey. And you really can live an extraordinary life if you allow yourself to. And I encourage you to start today.
Beautiful. Well, thank you for being such a beacon of light, Aura, in
Thank you.
that example of living that life for us. So,
Thank you, Christian.
yeah. Thank you. Thanks for being on.
And thank you for having me.